The night before my wedding, I couldn't sleep. Butterflies, nerves, excitement, it all swirled together. I thought it was the happiest night of my life, that the next day I would finally marry the man I loved. I didn't know that while I was sitting on my bed rehearsing my vows, my fiancé was in another room with the two people I trusted the most, my mother and my sister. That evening, I was in my room going through my dress one last time, making sure everything was perfect. My sister, Mia, had been distant all week, but I thought it was just her usual moodiness. My mother, on the other hand, had been overly affectionate with my fiancé, Jason. She kept saying how proud she was of me and how lucky he was. I noticed how Jason blushed when she touched his arm, but I brushed it off. She was just being friendly, I told myself. Families get emotional before weddings. Around midnight, I realized Jason hadn't texted me back in hours. I assumed he was with his friends, celebrating one last time as a bachelor. But something inside me felt wrong. I ignored it, convincing myself I was overthinking. Yet the silence in my phone, the stillness in the house, it all felt strange. I eventually fell asleep, not knowing that betrayal was unfolding just a few rooms away. The morning came, and everything felt off. My sister avoided eye contact, my mother was unusually quiet, and Jason didn't show up on time. I was pacing in my dressing room when one of my bridesmaids, Emma, came in looking pale. She closed the door behind her and said, "You need to see this." She handed me her phone. It was a video, a short clip recorded at the hotel bar the night before. The clip showed my mother laughing with Jason, sitting far too close, her hand on his leg. Then the camera panned as my sister entered, whispered something to them, and they all left together. I felt my stomach drop. "Maybe it's nothing," I whispered, but my voice trembled. Emma looked at me, her face full of pity. "There's more," she said. Then she showed me a message that someone had anonymously sent to her that morning. It said, "Your bride needs to know what her family did." Room 312. I froze. That was Jason's room. I walked out of the dressing room without saying a word. My heels clicked on the marble floor as I headed toward the hotel elevator. My bridesmaids followed me, trying to stop me, but I couldn't hear them. My heart was pounding so loudly that it drowned out everything else. When I reached room 312, I hesitated. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the keycard. I opened the door, and my world ended. There they were, my mother, my sister, and my fiancé, wrapped in sheets, half asleep and half guilty. My mother gasped, covering herself. My sister started crying instantly. Jason jumped out of bed, mumbling my name, begging me to listen. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, as my vision blurred. My whole life flashed before my eyes, every memory of family dinners, motherly hugs, sisterly advice, all poisoned in that single moment. I turned and left without a word. I locked myself in the bathroom downstairs, ripped off my veil, and vomited. The betrayal burned through every part of me. Hours later, I still went through with the ceremony. Not because I wanted to marry Jason, but because I wanted them to face what they had done in front of everyone. When the music started and I walked down the aisle, everyone smiled. They didn't know the truth. My mother was standing near the front, pretending to be proud. My sister avoided looking at me. Jason stood there, pale and sweating. I reached the altar, looked into his eyes, and whispered, "I know everything." His face turned white. I asked the officiant for the microphone. Everyone thought I was going to say my vows. Instead, I said, "Before I promise myself to someone, I need to tell the truth." The crowd went silent. I looked at my mother and sister. Last night, the man I was supposed to marry slept with my mother and my sister. And I walked in on them. Gasps filled the room. My mother shouted, "How dare you lie?" And before I could move, she slapped me across the face. The sound echoed through the hall. 200 guests watched in horror. I didn't flinch. I turned my face back to her and said calmly, "Thank you for showing them who you really are." Then I dropped the microphone, took off my ring, and walked away. My father, who had been sitting in the back, rushed to me, tears in his eyes. He said he had suspected something was wrong but never imagined it was this. That night, I packed my things and left the city. My phone exploded with messages, some from relatives calling me dramatic, others from guests apologizing for what they saw. Jason tried to reach out, begging for forgiveness, saying it was a mistake, that they were drunk. But betrayal doesn't erase that easily. My mother and sister became outcasts in the family after that. The hall was filled with music, laughter, and the soft hum of 200 guests chatting under glittering chandeliers. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my wedding day. But as I stood in front of the mirror, my heart was cold and steady. I already knew what had happened. I had seen it with my own eyes. My mother and my sister had slept with my fiancé the night before. I wasn't here to marry anyone anymore. I was here to finish this nightmare in front of everyone who had believed the lie. When I stepped into the hall, the room erupted with applause. I could feel hundreds of eyes admiring my dress, my calmness, my supposed joy. My mother stood proudly in the front row, pretending everything was perfect. My sister, in her pale pink bridesmaid dress, smiled nervously. Jason, my fiancé, stood at the altar, trying to look composed. His hands were trembling, the same hands that had held my mother and my sister just hours before. I walked down the aisle slowly, each step heavier than the last. The air felt thick. My father was nowhere to be seen. He'd left years ago, and my mother had been the one who raised me. I used to think she was strong, protective, the kind of woman who would do anything for her children. I never thought she'd betray me in the cruelest way possible. When I reached the altar, Jason tried to take my hand. I let him, just for a moment. His hand was clammy, shaking. He looked into my eyes, searching for the girl he once loved, but she was gone. I leaned closer and whispered, "You should have thought about this before last night." His eyes widened in panic. The officiant began the ceremony, his voice echoing softly through the hall. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to celebrate." I interrupted. "Excuse me," I said, raising my hand. The entire hall fell silent. Jason looked at me in horror. "I need to say something before this goes any further." The officiant hesitated. "Would you like to say your vows now?" I smiled bitterly. "No, I'd like to say the truth." I turned to face the crowd. "Before you all congratulate us, before anyone talks about love or commitment, there's something you need to know." My voice didn't tremble. I felt powerful, steady. "Last night, the man I was supposed to marry slept with my mother and my sister." The crowd gasped. The sound was sharp, like glass breaking. Jason stammered, "That's not true," but I cut him off. I walked in on them. I saw it myself. The people standing right there, I pointed at my mother and sister, betrayed me together. My mother's face twisted with rage. "How dare you lie like this?" she shouted, storming toward me. The guests were frozen, unsure what to do. My sister began crying, her makeup streaking down her cheeks. Jason tried to grab the mic from my hand, but I pulled away. My mother reached me in seconds. "You ungrateful child," she hissed. Then, before I could even react, she slapped me. The sound of her palm hitting my face echoed through the hall, silencing everything. I could feel the sting spread across my cheek, but I didn't move. Everyone gasped. Some guests stood, others whispered in shock. I looked her straight in the eyes and said softly, "Thank you for showing them who you are." Then I turned to the guests and continued, my voice calm. "This wedding is over, but I wanted you all to see the truth before I walked away. I won't let them hide behind fake smiles anymore." Jason started shouting, trying to explain himself, saying it was a mistake, that he'd been drunk, that he loved me. My sister sobbed, begging me not to ruin the family. My mother screamed that I was making a fool of myself. But no one was listening to them anymore. The guests were stunned, whispering to each other, phones already out, some recording. I walked down the aisle slowly, just as I had come in, but this time, there was no music. Only the sound of my heels clicking against the floor and the heavy silence of 200 people watching everything crumble. Outside, the wind hit my face, and for the first time all day, I took a deep breath. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stood there, feeling oddly free. I'd spent years trying to please people who had only taken from me. My mother had always controlled my life, made me feel like I owed her everything. My sister had always been jealous, competing for every bit of attention. And Jason, he'd been my dream, the person I believed would finally love me for who I was. But they all destroyed that dream together. When I left the venue, I could still hear the chaos behind me, my mother screaming at the guests, my sister begging her to stop, Jason calling my name. I didn't look back. I walked to my car, still wearing my white dress, still holding the bouquet. I sat behind the wheel and looked at myself in the mirror. My cheek was red from the slap, my mascara slightly smeared, but I looked stronger than ever. I drove away, not knowing where I was going, just needing to escape. I ended up by the ocean, the place I always went when I needed to think. The waves crashed against the rocks, steady and endless. I threw my bouquet into the sea and whispered, "This is where it ends." Weeks later, I heard from relatives that my mother and sister had become pariahs in the family. Jason tried to contact me many times, but I never responded. The videos from the wedding spread quickly online, and the whole town knew the truth. Some people pitied me, others admired me for standing up in front of everyone.